It's great right now to catch up with Geoff Grammer from the Albuquerque Journal, talking about the success the Mountain West is currently enjoying once again in basketball. 5 teams in the top 35 or so in the metrics, 3 teams right now in the AP top 25. So, Geoff, we always appreciate your time and your coverage, a great resource for Mountain West basketball fans, including fans of the Aztecs. I'll just start with this. I know it's only January 8th. How do you look at the Mountain West right now? Like, do you have tiers that you put these top 5 or 6 teams in right now, or is it too early to say that?
Well, I'll say this: if I'm going to tier it, I'm gonna break it off after that top 5. I think Boise State will still kind of make some noise. I'd be surprised if you want to say the top 5 do kind of separate themselves. I'd be surprised if Boise State doesn't find a way to knock off 1 or 2 of them. I don't know if they'll get back into that top 5. But right now, I don't know enough about the top 5 to say for sure I can break those tiers off. I do think Colorado State at their best, when they were beating up on Creighton the way they were beating them up, and when their offense is clicking, and yes, they got a great point guard, I think Colorado State can still make a case that maybe they are as good as anybody in the league. San Diego State, of course, when everything's clicking, and it sure looks like it has been the past 3 games for them, obviously has a case for number 1. New Mexico, Utah State, even though Utah State knocked off Colorado State, it was at home on Saturday, and Nevada, all 3 have still looked really, really good at times, but are still largely unproven, right? We can't say that they've established themselves as a clear-cut title contender, but when it's unproven, that means it's still kind of at least a little bit of a question mark. I think all 3 of those teams at their best might still be able to make a case. So if I'm power ranking them, I'm going San Diego State 1, Colorado State 2. But I do think just entering the second week of league play, I won't say definitively yet that I can break off any one of those top 5 teams just yet.
And with those 5 teams being really good, metrics are good, and there could be a situation at the end of the year where potentially this could be a 5-bid league. Do you think that's realistic to think could happen?
Yeah, I think it's realistic. I'm not going to predict 5. I'll say 3. Not 3. I'm sorry. I'll say 4. But the math works out where if entering league play, if you got 5 teams in the top 40 of the net and 5 teams in the top 40 of KenPom and all the metrics that the team sheets that the NCAA selection committee uses, if you're in the top 40 and you don't fall, you don't have a hiccup against a Wyoming or an Air Force or a Fresno State, who are the teams at the bottom of those rankings, and maybe a San Jose State, their rankings aren't very good right now in those computer metrics. If you don't have a hiccup against one of those teams and you avoid bad losses, as long as you kind of hold serve at home and maybe split on the road with those top 5, it's going to be interesting. I think there's enough quad 1 opportunities in this league because of those net metrics for 5 teams that I think there could be a path for 5 teams. Now, like I said, you can't have very many hiccups at all, and that means Boise State could be a little bit of a spoiler because while their metrics aren't bad, they're one of those opportunities that you better get to make sure you have a solid quad 2 win. So it's a kind of interesting layout of the league this year because Air Force picks somebody off every year. UNLV at home probably still picks somebody off at some point. Boise State's probably going to get a couple wins. I think if those top 5 teams can really avoid the really bad losses, the Fresno States, Air Forces, and Wyomings, I still think there's a possibility that 4 or 5 is really the more realistic end season reality than 3.
Geoff Grammer, Albuquerque Journal, with us right now on John and Jim. We're talking Mountain West basketball. What would you do at the end of the year, Geoff? I'm always curious in this scenario. Jaden Ledie's played like an All-American. He plays a different position than Isaiah Stevens, who's played like an All-American. If at the end of the year, and there's still so much basketball, understood, and there's other really good players, if not great players, in the Mountain West, but if at the end of the year, Jaden Ledie is still, a 20-10 guy, and Isaiah Stevens is doing everything he's doing, how do you determine the best player in the league? Is it based on where they finish in the league?
It's interesting because I've never been a hard and fast believer in the best player on the best team, right? And I know a lot of coaches certainly are that way. I haven't been. If all things are really equal otherwise, and it's really hard to differentiate, then yeah, I'd probably go with which one of those 2 guys probably led his team to winning it, maybe head to head. I know they don't play against each other head to head, but maybe which one of those teams led his team to beat Colorado State or the other way around to beat San Diego State. I'd certainly lean that way. Um, I hate to say this. I would say some voters probably would lean. I would hope that it wouldn't enter my mind, but Isaiah Stevens being a fifth-year guy and kind of showing that he has done this, he's kind of done it in a variety of ways. He took a back. First of all, he was freshman of the year when he first got in the league, and then he took a back seat to David Roddy for 2 years and kind of made David Roddy look like an NBA player. I don't say that meaning he's not an NBA player. David Roddy's a very good player, but a lot of that had to do with Isaiah Stevens as a point guard helping him develop. And then Isaiah Stevens kind of took back into the lead role, the alpha on that team. Jaden Ledee, though, he's been unstoppable. I think when Jaden Ledee, I don't know, maybe it's just the power forward thing. When the power forward is dominating the game, it just looks so much more intimidating, more dominating than when a point guard does. When Isaiah Stevens dominates a game, it's beautiful to watch. Their offense is beautiful, but it doesn't look as dominating. Maybe it's just because it's a smooth looking game as a point guard, or as a power forward, it's just like, what are you going to do with that guy? I think those two guys have separated themselves from the rest of the field, though. There's some players having good seasons, but it's clear those two right now are the clear cut, 1 and 1A.
Do you see any surprises in the Mountain West Conference, or do you think that the top 5 teams that we've talked about, it's going to be between those teams, down the stretch here, going into obviously conference play and into the tournament?
I'd say, well, to date, I would say the two biggest surprises to me are Utah State and Boise State.
Mm-hmm.
Utah for different reasons. Utah State because they've played so well, with not one single point returning on that roster, and Danny Sprinkle taking over a job. So I think Utah State's been the surprise to date. And then I think Boise State's been a little disappointing because I thought their point guard situation would have, frankly, played out better to this point. And I think that's what's really been holding them back. I do think if they can get good point guard play, consistent point guard play, and they've started to at times, I think then Max Rice kind of rolling off into that shooting guard role where he kind of hits all these awkward shots and annoys fan bases all around the league because he's a coach's son, and Tyson Dagenhart's just really good. I thought they would be better, and they haven't been. Down the stretch, if I see one surprise or if I want to predict one surprise, I really don't. I don't think Boise State is going to get back into the title contention mix. And right now, I just think those top 5 teams are better than everybody else in the league.
Geoff Grammer, Albuquerque Journal, with us right now, and John and Jim. So, Jeff, you know the story because you were there, covering San Diego State's run all the way to a national championship game. But you go back to last year, and the Aztecs had trouble with New Mexico. There's no question about it. They lost at Viejas to the Lobos, their only regular season or only home loss a season ago. And then, of course, the Lobos led into the final seconds of the game before Lamont Butler hit a shot at the buzzer, in Houston. So, what is the expectation for Saturday at the Pit? I mean, both of these teams have games in front of it where they're on the road and they could get tripped up. I think New Mexico's on the road, right? In Vegas?
Yeah, at UNLV tomorrow.
So, you have that UNLV, San Diego State at San Jose State, but assuming those teams can find ways on the road, this is a pretty compelling matchup this weekend, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think what New Mexico has going for it when it's at its best is it does have, I mean, first of all, there were 5 preseason All Mountain West players, right? And 2 of them were on the Lobos. And right now, those 2 players aren't their best player. Their best player is Donovan Dent, a California kid, Mr. Basketball in California a couple of years ago, who's now a sophomore and has become the best player on this Lobo team. But Jalen House, if he keeps his emotions in check, which I think Viejas fans can remember, he revels. He just loves when people boo him. He loves when everyone on the court and in the arena hates him. If he plays that up a little too much, he gets in foul trouble like he did at Colorado State, only played 18 minutes at Colorado State. He was actually plus 10 in the game, and they were actually winning until he got into foul trouble. And he really hurt his team because he got some silly fouls. I do think referees certainly know him by now. But when he keeps that in check, Jalen House is really good, and he can be really an X factor against any team anywhere, and that includes San Diego State. Jamal Mashburn Jr., on the other hand, he's missed 7 games. He had a thumb injury. He doesn't look like he's healthy yet. And if his mid-range jumper, which is a low efficiency shot anyway, but he takes it more than anybody in the country, and hit it at a fairly decent rate, at least for a mid-range shot anyway. He hasn't been hitting those. So, Jamal Mashburn Jr., if he doesn't get his shot back, if his thumb continues to bother him, they really are missing two guys in Jalen House and if he gets in foul trouble, and Jamal Mashburn Jr. that they just had last year that made the matchup with San Diego State. So in my opinion, it was in UNM's favor last year in both of those games. And if they kept playing them, I think UNM would have kept having an advantage just because of the matchups. It was the only matchup I think San Diego State had that was really put them at a disadvantage just because of those small, quick guards. But this year, I don't know, because Jamal Mashburn Jr. is not really hitting shots, and Jalen House has tended to get even more emotional than he was. So I don't know if Donovan Dent as a sophomore is going to be able to carry them through this one.
A year ago at Viejas in that New Mexico 76-67 win, Jalen House 29 points, Jamal Mashburn Jr. 22 points, those two combining for 51 points in that Lobos victory. In San Diego, the two teams will hook up again in Albuquerque this Saturday, right here on San Diego Sports 760. Geoff, really appreciate your time and your coverage for Mountain West basketball fans in the Albuquerque Journal, and we look forward to doing it throughout the course of this 2024 season. So thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
All right, Geoff Grammer, Albuquerque Journal. Big week ahead in Mountain West hoops.